Hello and welcome to the Ygartua Art Chronicles podcast, where we explore the amazing life and career of Paul Ygartua. I'm Ed Hoskin, and today we continue our discussion with Paul, chatting about the latter part of his UK life before he ventured off to Canada. Liverpool at that time, there was, apart from music, was there art everywhere as well, or was it mostly music?
There was a lot of art everywhere, as well. Music, art, it was great, And then, of course, there was a lot of theatre. I actually danced on stage for a few different presentations. One was The Taming of the Shrew, Kiss Me Kate at the Playhouse. And they chose me because, of course, after doing gymnastics for many years, I was obviously could have been a good dancer. But anyway, because I was able to move and do things, they came to the YMCA one night. This theatre group said, "We're looking for dancers for the next production. It's going to be on in Liverpool." So me and another chap said, "Hey, okay, that sounds good idea,
And I'm just thinking, I've seen a few photos we're posting. There's a few photos going back into those times, and
right.
Some people will know that you've got quite a good, distinctive, funky look always. What was your look like back then? What were you rocking back then? What was there?
It was more beatnik, wasn't it? Long, sloppy Joe pullovers down to your arse, and then it was sort of a very loose.
And did you need Did you need a job at the same time? Did you ever have any sort of part-time work at the same time to keep things going, or not?
In those days, believe it or not, I got a full grant. So I was living off government money. I used to get £300 twice or three times a year as a grant. And of course, college was free. I mean, that was England in those days,
Yeah.
They paid you to go to college. It was amazing.
I know.
So, I mean, I never had to work, although I did work, but not for an official company. I worked for my Mr. Percival at weekends.
Oh, yeah.
The chap who took my dad in. I'd go with him to a market garden and worked for him every weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So I did get 10 shillings a day off him, which I was very grateful for because I ended up the richest kid in the neighbourhood.
And all this time, as I said, all this time you were still going off to the Basque Country every couple of years.
That's right.
And so
I went on my own. After that, I went on my own.
Yeah.
I went with my family till I was about 14, 15. And then after that, I went on my own there. When I guess I must have been 17, just after I finished college, I went to the Basque Country. And then from there, I went to Canary Islands on a cargo ship.
Ooh.
And then back to Liverpool. But I took an old man there, an old gentleman called Madriaga from Liverpool. They were afraid he couldn't do the trip on his own. So I offered to take him. And so we went on the train all the way to the Basque Country. And I spent the time on the farm when I was there for a couple of months before I got a boat to Canary Islands.
And I've read that on those breaks. How long did you spend in the? Was it like a month or two in the summer?
The summers, it was always, from the first time it was 6 months. After that, it was always about 2 or 3 months.
So it was sort of July, August, September, or July,
August. Yeah. With me, it had to be during the break from college, So exactly. It would be a couple of months,
And I've read that you said your mum had to. Obviously, she progressed in Spanish, I suppose, each time.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, she took lessons. I never took lessons, but my brother and my mum ended up taking lessons.
Yeah, and she learned, and she learned recipes and cultural elements as well.
She learned all the good recipes. She cooked better than the Spaniards in the end, better than the Basques. She had all kinds of recipes, paellas. She did one of the best paellas I've ever had was my mum's paella.
Yeah. Do you remember some? I mean, what are the sort of smells and the taste of that region? Just to all the.
Yeah. They live for food. So they talk about, once they finish one meal, they start talking about what they're going to eat for the next meal. They live for I mean, it's a lot of seafood, a lot of great bean recipes, a lot of really old. My grandfather, because he was a great chef, I had a few of his old recipes that he did for the family, and he used to make his own bread. And oh my God, yeah, we had a big oven on the farm, a big like outdoor brick oven it was like a pizza oven, and he used to do bread, make bread there and everything.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah, great.
There was still links, or there were still some ties kept with people from the boat, even arriving from.
Yes. Yeah.
So he was still in touch with a few of his.
Yeah, a few of
comrades?
the Basques that were on the boat with him. They lived in a village. They came from a village about 20 miles from my dad's village, and so yeah, we used to visit them as well. Yeah. They were interesting. They were all staying in Liverpool during the time my dad was there. So we've been to they even came to my dad's funeral when he died. All these guys, they came from all over England to my dad's funeral. It's funny because I never, my dad was a very low key guy. He never boasted about anything. But the funeral he had, I've never seen so many people. He couldn't fit them in the church. They were outside everywhere.
Wow.
And one guy told me about my dad, and said, your dad was one of the strongest men I've ever known. And I said, oh, why is that? He said, well, one day he went to clock on, like they clock on at the factory, right?
Yeah.
And this one guy who hated my dad because he kept calling him a spick and, just real derogatory type stuff. My dad just took it, never said a word because he just got used to taking it. Well, anyway, this day, this guy jumps in front of him, and he was a lot bigger than my dad. He jumps in front of him and clocks on before him. And that meant my dad, because he'd missed the time, he had to lose a quarter of an hour wages, right? So my dad just tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, do you want to apologize for doing that? So anyway, he told him where to go. This guy told my dad where to go. So my dad lifted him up by the scruff of the neck on his collars and hung him on a nail on the wall. And he stayed on the nail till his coat ripped, because my dad turned around and said, anyone take him off, I'll put them on it. So, and my dad would never tell me a story like that, but this chap told me this story. And I thought, wow, isn't that amazing? You get a friend of your dad tells you these things,
Yeah. Apparently there was a Basque club, and there was a definite Basque community.
That's right.
Maybe they all lived in the same area, but there was a Basque club. Does that ring any bells?
There was a Basque club, yeah, and it was mainly these, basically the expats, the ones that had mostly decided to live in Liverpool, not go back to the Basque country. And some of them were like my dad's age, and then of course there was all their children that I used to know, and yeah, it was amazing, And we used to have monthly events where we'd meet and discuss things, and it's quite a fascinating group actually,
Much like your art, it's a very colourful beginning to life, isn't it? Really. I mean, it's compared to most people, it's an extremely colourful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
initial experience, It's
having the heritage. Yeah.
Yeah, and travelling so much. I can't imagine many people were travelling that much in those days.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, we were my dad's car. We drove to Spain the second year. The first year we went by boat. Second year we went by car. And my dad had an old Ford Prefect. Looked like one of these old box type cars. And when we drove in the village, it was the first car to enter the village.
In Spain, you mean? Or in
the Basque country. It was the first car to enter the village. So we took, every time we went to the beach, he had 13 people in the car, hanging on the sides. It was hilarious. But I mean, they'd never seen it, except on the television or whatever. They'd never been close to a car, even half of these people. And they just travelled around with donkeys and mules and things like that,
Wow.
It's quite fascinating to see the change in Spain since Franco is just absolutely amazing,
So if we're people who don't know the Basque Country that well, from around the world. There's no official sort of capital, but what would you describe as the main area? Is Bilbao?
Well, Bilbao is the main city, but Guernica is I guess it's the historical capital, and that's where they have their parliament still. So it is the capital, Guernica. But of course, it's Victoria is a big city, and so is Bilbao. So they do most of the commerce, But still, at the political centre is still about Guernica, and Guernica because of course it had that devastating thing during the Civil War where Franco hired the German Luftwaffe to bomb it,
and hence the painting, and
hence the painting. Yeah. The Basque provinces, the 5 different provinces in the Basque country. And there's 2 in France, of course, as well. There's 2 in France.
I guess they have some sort of independence as a recognised.
They have autonomy in the Basque country.
They have autonomy, yeah.
Yeah, they don't pay their tax. They used to pay all their taxes to Madrid. Now, you drive through the Basque country. They've got the best roads in Europe. It's like the most amazing. Because of course the schooling now, they teach Basque in the schools. It's like they've got autonomy.
So all of this must have, as I said, this is quite exotic for back in those days. I imagine to your friends back in those times, it's fairly exotic to them, because I would have thought the majority of people in Liverpool would not have seen many people who would have an exotic life as you had at that time.
That's right. Yeah. It's very interesting. That's for sure. Yeah, most of the people that I knew in school and they'd never left the country. Half of them had never even seen the ocean. They'd never been to the coast. If they were from Birmingham, there's lots of people that never even been to the coast.
Yeah.
And it's only 100 mile away.
Yeah. But back in those days, I can't imagine, but I try to imagine that it would be quite a journey for an average person to think about making. Sure. But the fact that you were connected was,
In those days, just to go to London from Liverpool, even in a car, would be a 2-day trip. There was no motorways. No motorways. You had to go on little side roads.
2-day trip.
It was a 2-day trip by car. Yeah. You stop halfway, get a hotel or something. That's what we did. My mum and dad, when we travelled to Spain that year, we stopped off somewhere. I think it's just past Stratford-on-Avon or someplace, and then carried on to Dover the next day.
On the ferry.
Yeah, took the ferry and then drove through France. That was about 4 days just driving through France. So to get from Liverpool to the Basque Country in those days was like a 10-day trip.
So you at the Liverpool School of Art, you were doing silversmithing and what? Split with life drawing or split with sort of classical fine art?
It was silversmithing and industrial design. So I was drawing, designing. At the same time, I was actually making the product that I was designing. So, for instance, if it was a coffee pot, I would design it first, and then from the scratch sheet of metal, I would make the coffee pot from that. I've still got a couple here that I made.
Still going strong.
Jewellery as well. It was mostly jewellery, but some of the larger pieces were like coffee pots, chalices, And then a couple of times a week, I ended up teaching a class in night school, because the teacher there wanted to take time off, and in those days they just get one of the pupils to take over the night school class for him.
And you're still a fan of jewellery, aren't you, these days? You don't mind wearing a few rings?
Well, I used to wear more, but you know what? With painting, I get paint in my hands. I've stopped wearing now. I've got one ring now. My others, I don't wear very often. Jewelleries, I used to like a lot of jewellery. I lost most of it, so money down the drain, Got stolen as well, some of it. Some of the best pieces. I had a Netsuke carving with a diamond in it that I traded in Jerusalem for a painting with the diamond, the diamond merchant I talked to you about. Anyway, that's gone.
And so at this time, at the School of Art, you were focusing on that. Was there any